Well, it's official. The ACC is going to exist in 2025. Shocker. But what about after that?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and so much more. We've always got you covered, getting you ready for the season, which inches closer. Happy July. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more, not less, more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We'll check in with the pressure gauge on Hugh Freeze. I don't think there's any pressure there. Somebody does, but we'll talk about that. And then, what's the most important game on Nebraska's schedule? It's not Colorado, and I'll tell you why later. But we start with the ACC, which here we are, July 1st. The day that Stanford, Cal, and SMU, still doesn't feel right to say, but that's where we're at in the world of college realignment and athletics. They're officially members of the ACC. They have joined the league. And, there were a select few. I won't name names, because I actually don't know the people's names necessarily thought this, who believe the ACC could implode by June 30th and July 1st, and then they could vote to dissolve the league by 2025. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. These teams are coming into the league, and then what you're going to have is the league will exist as you know it in 2024, probably in 2025 as well. I've talked about that with Kenton Gibbs of Locked On ACC just this past week, with regards to how the league is still going to have Florida State and Clemson it's still going to contain Florida State and Clemson by 2025. But then after that, the question becomes, what do you do? What do you do if you are the ACC? Does ESPN come to the table and say, hey, FSU and Clemson are gone, which is my predicted hypothetical, so we need to reassess the television value here, because you no longer have a foothold in South Carolina. You no longer have as big of a foothold in Florida. You've only got Miami down there, but you don't have Florida State. You lost a couple of big brands. We need to reassess the payment structure here. I think that can be situated rather simply, because there's going to be a cost. Florida State and Clemson, I would be utterly stunned if they leave the ACC for free. It's going to cost them a pretty penny. So whatever money you might lose, if ESPN says, hey, we agreed to pay this amount when these guys were a part of it, but they're not a part of it anymore, then suddenly you go, well, we don't want to take less money. Oh, wait, no, we're just getting money from them. Oh, okay, yeah, no, we're good to go there. I don't believe the ACC has to make any realignment moves, has to make an expansion move once Florida State and Clemson leave, because they've brought in these three schools. And something else that I've discussed as recently as a couple of weeks ago, all the days blend together in the summer, quite frankly. SMU is a really interesting player in this conversation because their desire to be great cannot be overstated. The donors and boosters and alumni and athletic department, everybody at that school that once upon a time got the death penalty for stuff that is quite literally legal and not even what's the word I'm looking for? It's negligible. It's negligible nowadays. Yeah, that's how far we've come in college athletics. If they go into the ACC and continue with that desire, and Rhett Lashlee is able to build them into a consistent winning program, have you lost that much in the league? Yeah, you have. Okay, you've lost a sizable amount. I have often had people send me messages or talked with others who discuss these sorts of situations, or people who are interested, like, well, it feels a lot like the Pac-12. I don't agree. I do not agree that the ACC feels like the Pac-12. It feels far more like the Big 12, which, need I remind you, is still around, is still kicking, and has no current plans to go elsewhere. They have positioned themselves in a very strong position to just continue existing. I didn't say a strong position to win national championships, and that's the angle you have to approach it if you're the ACC. If you are a league where your flagship football programs are Miami and North Carolina and maybe even SMU from a brand standpoint and a financial standpoint, then that's a league that's a league that can continue. That's a league that continues at some level. Does it continue at the same level? No, it does not. But what's the obligation of ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips? To keep the league alive, number one, and then number two, give it the opportunity to compete at the highest level possible. And it's also not as if, even if in football, which is the biggest moneymaker and the driver of all this sort of stuff with television networks, even if you're not going to win national championships in football, because I don't know which program that would be. You know, Mario Cristobal is a great recruiter and has won a conference championship before. I could see him doing that as early as this season with Miami in the ACC. Certainly down the line. If you tell me Mario Cristobal wins an ACC championship within the next 2 or 3 years, FSU or Clemson or not, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. National championship, haven't seen it yet. Doesn't mean it can't be done. Just have to see a few other steps before we get to that particular bridge to cross. But if you don't have programs that are consistently pushing for a national championship, does that mean your league can't exist? Does that mean your league can't make money? Does that mean your league can't be enjoyable to discuss and relevant? No, it doesn't mean that at all. The Big 12 in the college football playoff era, sure, they put teams in the playoff. Lincoln Riley made the playoff a bunch. Didn't win a playoff game. Didn't play for a national championship. Were they irrelevant? I wouldn't argue that that's the case. And the ACC certainly will maintain its autonomous, now 4, used to be 5, status in which the winner of that conference is going to be one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So you're going to get playoff access. And that's what you need to be able to do. Just stay on people's radar. Remind recruits and transfers and coaches that, yeah, you can get to the playoff here. There is an auto berth if you win the conference. And maybe a program right now that is not able to operate a national championship sort of level and win a national championship, maybe they can become that in the future. Maybe that's Miami. Maybe that's SMU. Maybe that's North Carolina. I think they'd have to move on from Mac Brown to get to that sort of level. Maybe it's someone we're not thinking of. You don't know, because there's a long time between when Florida State and Clemson leave and when the next massive round of realignment happens, because I think they're probably out of the conference by 2026. And then from there, you're looking ahead to the future, which is early 2030s, when you could have even more realignment and consolidation at the highest level. Of course, the Pac-12 realignment, those moves will get decided in early 2025 and be in place by 2026, whatever those plans end up being. So beyond this year and next year, I believe there will be an ACC, and it can exist as a league that is relevant, that is fun, that is somewhat true to its roots and traditions. Is it winning national championships? Perhaps not for a while. Does that mean never, ever again? Not necessarily. You got to see how things play out, see how everybody responds to the new college football world and how competitive you can actually be with the Power 2. Sure, all those factors are absolutely in play. Can the ACC continue to exist? Yes. You can argue the Big 12 is stronger. You can argue the ACC is stronger. At the very least, they are close. You can have that discussion one way or the other. No matter what you believe on that front, that is a reasonable discussion. There is no reasonable discussion to say the ACC without FSU and Clemson, or even with them, frankly, is the same as the Big 10 and SEC, or that the Big 12 is the same as the Big 10 and SEC, because they're not. And we all know it. And you wouldn't even have that debate. But if you have that thought of like, no, it's this, but then someone else could chime in and say, no, it's this, and that person isn't just, outright trolling, then that's how you know. They are at least on a similar level, and I think they can continue to exist in that space, and I think they should. Call me a traditionalist, but I think they should. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB is the handle. Hugh Freeze is under pressure, according to a particular show host, and yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. We'll talk about that next. But first, did you know this episode is brought to you by FanDuel? Well, you do now. I love sports, if that wasn't obvious, and I love them so much that I never want them to stop. And when they do, I get sad as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing like I want them to. But FanDuel, luckily enough, lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the FanDuel app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long, including everything you could possibly want to bet on college football. You've got win totals, individual games, conference title odds, national championship odds. It's all over there. So head to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. Hugh Freeze at Auburn is under some pressure, just not the kind of pressure that some people might think. That's Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn, joining me here on the show. There was a take flying around about how Hugh Freeze is going to be on the hottest seat in the SEC or among the hottest seats in 2025. I found that to be a little bit insane just because of a 6-win first campaign. They are recruiting well, trending up, getting a lot of big-time wins on the trail. I don't see Hugh Freeze having a hot seat this year, next year. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think you get fired within a year or two in the SEC unless the future looks grim. And I don't think the future looks grim at Auburn at all. I mean, I think even 2024, this upcoming season, the schedule is actually pretty favorable for Auburn. And then going into 2025, Auburn's in a prime spot to be going into the 2025 season with back-to-back top 10 recruiting classes. So to me, like, obviously you don't want to go 6-6 again, Spencer, and I don't think Auburn will, but even if you do, like, you can still point and say, okay, Auburn's going to have a lot more talented roster in the immediate future.
I agree. And I think, let's say that scenario were to come to pass, which neither you nor myself expect. But let's just say you and I are wrong. Not that that's ever happened before. I'm pretty sure every take I've ever given has been correct, and you as well. Let's say they go 6-6.
Especially your takes about Cal.
Yes, they're spot on every single time.
Right.
So I think that if Auburn goes 6-6 this year, there is more pressure going into 2025, but this all stems from a take on, I don't even remember the guy's name. I think you know him better than I do, about
Michael Bratton. He went on a show in Birmingham on Jocks.
Yeah, and it didn't land very well, I don't think, amongst particular fan bases. And I think the reason is that even if he goes at 6-6 again this year, 2025 is a prove it year, but not a prove it or you're fired year, barring a disaster. Like, everything can always be overcome in this sense if there's a disastrous season, but I just don't see any indication that this year or next year is just going to be a complete train wreck for Auburn.
Yeah, I don't think so. And Spencer, this was one of those weekends in the offseason where you miss football a little bit more than the other ones, just something about it. And so you look up some old games and you watch some things. And I mean, some of the stuff I saw from Auburn last year was atrocious. It was atrocious. And I had kind of forgotten how bad some of the offensive scheme and game planning was. I mean, it was abysmal. And so now you've got Hugh Freeze coming in and he's taking over the offense. And so I think by nature, that's going to be a little bit better. But even if Auburn did go 6-6, I think the messaging from some part of the fan base, they're going to want him gone just because that's irrational. And there's some of that in every fan base throughout college football. That's why we love it so much. But I think a big chunk of the fan base would be, okay, well, it's because Peyton Thorne was your quarterback. And so now Auburn's either going to go into next season with a transfer guy, another transfer guy, or Walker White or Hank Brown. They're recruiting some talented freshmen as well. We'll see if they can land the likes of a Juju Lewis. But you can turn the page and say, okay, this is like the true start of, okay, Hugh Freeze's handpicked quarterback at Auburn. So, I mean, there will be a narrative and a message to push if he does go 6-6, but I just don't see that as likely.
I don't either, and I don't know that 10-2 is necessarily in the cards either for a massive year two leap. The schedule, as you mentioned, does work out somewhat favorably, but yeah. Just to put a final point on the Hugh Freeze discussion, if you're looking at him and saying, "Well, 6-6 is not good enough at Auburn," well, no, not every single year, but you have to factor into account what he was taking over, what situation he was inheriting. But even if you look as you did last year and said, yeah, some of this offensive game planning is atrocious. It's terrible. It's not. Last time I checked, Zach, there was a change at the offensive coordinator position. You contrast that with a Lincoln Riley at USC who got to LA and had success in year one, but everyone looked around and said, hey, this defensive coordinator is not good enough. This is going to be a problem. And he just kind of kept to it. He just kept him on staff and paid the price for that. I am encouraged by the fact that Hugh Freeze came in and quickly, after just 1 year, After 1 year, after putting his staff together, doing a search and saying, this is the OC I want, saw the results in 1 year and said, nope, that's not good enough and made a change. I like that from coaching staffs.
Yeah, and he did it with both of the coordinators. And I mean, not to compare everything to Alabama, but that's what Saban did after his first year at Bama. He came in, all right, the coordinators weren't up to what he wanted, and so he made a change. And the coaching staff got better pretty much every year that he was there. And we're going to see if that happens with Hugh Freeze or not. But the two guys that he has now, Derek Nix, who he got from Ole Miss this offseason, I think he's going to be really, really exceptional because, Hugh Freeze is the type of coach that really probably arguably overvalues folks that are close to him and he could trust, and the terminology needs to be the same. Of course, every coach wants that. I think Hugh Freeze really, really wants that. And then DJ Durkin on the defensive side of the ball, former head coach, has what it takes to win at the SEC level. We've seen it. So, you got to like what he's done this offseason to kind of eliminate the chance of what happened last year happening again. I think what it's going to come down to this year is just overall talent. And I think how quick can this roster come together? It's a weird combination of a bunch of seniors that they've kind of picked from the portal and a bunch of guys that Hugh Freeze has recruited, which he hasn't been here that long, a year and a half. So it's a bunch of either redshirt freshmen, true sophomores, and true freshmen. So just a lot of young guys and a lot of older guys. We'll see how that roster comes together.
The schedule comes together in a way that I can see Auburn kind of poking their head into the top 25 early, perhaps fading out in the middle, and then set things up. If they win just like 1 or 2 marquee games on this schedule, that Iron Bowl could have some gigantic stakes because Alabama could be a 9 or 10 win team by that time and pushing for a playoff spot, and Auburn could be pushing for 9-3 SEC. You'll get a look. I don't think you get in, but you at least get a look and have that conversation. And I think if you can have 8 wins, which is feasible, not easy, but feasible for Auburn going into that Iron Bowl, I think that quiets down any discussion anywhere of, hey, is Hugh Freeze really the guy? Like, that would be, I think, a really, really good mark. And then you never know what happens in the Iron Bowl.
Sure. Yeah. Not so much in Tuscaloosa when Auburn's done crazy stuff. It's happened at home in Jordan-Hare, but it's a new era at Alabama. We'll see what happens. But you're right. CBS's Will Backus, I believe is his name, predicted Auburn to go 8-4 in an article that he did last week. Told, he said, take the over at FanDuel 7.5 total wins for Auburn because he thinks they're going to go 8-4. Yeah, what you said is interesting about the rankings. Right now, most of the preseason magazines and things that I'm seeing have Auburn at like 30-ish, within a few spots of 30, depending on where you look. And so if Auburn starts 4-0, which the 2 big ones in that is Cal, your favorite team, and Arkansas, which I think Auburn will be, both those are going to be at Jordan-Hare. Can Auburn be ranked? Can Auburn be a top 25 team when they host Oklahoma in week 5? I don't think it's out of the question. I don't think it's crazy. Then obviously if they beat Oklahoma and they head to Athens with a crisp 5-0, like how high could Auburn realistically be? Because that's going to be a quality win. Then I do think they're going to lose to Georgia. That may knock them out. But those next few games after they play Missouri, they go to Kentucky. They play, they play Vanderbilt. They've got a shot to be ranked again, like you said, before the Iron Bowl. It's kind of an interesting thought.
Oklahoma, at Georgia, at Missouri. I think that's the defining stretch. You can sell me on Missouri or Oklahoma being the most important game on the schedule for Auburn. If you're talking about going over their win total and going over their expectations, winning 8 or 9 games, I think you have to win certainly at least 1 because winning at Georgia is just... I'm not going to predict that. I haven't gotten to predictions yet officially, but I'm not going to predict anybody to go into Athens and come out a winner. That just seems like a really, really tall task. But the rest of the schedule, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Louisiana, Monroe, you win at home against Texas A&M, and 9-2 going into the Iron Bowl. I'm not saying I'm predicting it right now, but is it within the realm of a realistic possibility? Absolutely.
I think so. And, a lot of the folks that are kind of downplaying Auburn and just saying, they're going to go 6-6 or 7-5. It's like, that's fine, but show me the 5 losses. Normally,
5.
Auburn
I don't know if I see 5 losses on the schedule.
I don't either, Spencer. And I don't know if Auburn's going to be leaps and bounds better than they were a year ago. I do think they'll be better. And I think on paper, they're going to be 2 wins better than they were a year ago because I think they're going to win 8 games. But it's just different because what they've normally had to do with playing the SEC West and Georgia every year, they're not having to do that anymore because the SEC, has reshuffled on everything that they're doing, and there's no more divisions. Auburn and the rest of the SEC West benefit from that. It's the SEC East, or the former SEC East, is going to really feel that.
Yeah, Auburn's travel schedule, not brutal this year. 9 games this season played in the state of Alabama, one, of course, down in Tuscaloosa. But I guess the 5 losses would be Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, A&M, and Bama. I don't see Auburn going 0-5 there. I think that's
worst case scenario, right?
Yeah, that would be the 6-6 that we talked about, and neither you nor myself see that one coming.
Possible, but certainly not likely.
I don't see it as likely at all. That's Zac Blackerby, Locked on Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. Zac, appreciate it as always.
Hey, love you a long time.
Likewise. And you know what? I love talking about the most important game on a team schedule, not the biggest game. Is Colorado the most important game on Nebraska's schedule this year? I don't think it is, and I'll tell you why coming up next. The biggest game on Nebraska's schedule is probably against Colorado. It's going to be among the most hyped preseason or non-conference matchups in the first 3 weeks of the college football calendar. The biggest opponent they play is Ohio State. Their most important game, November 16th, late in the year at USC. Spencer, why wouldn't it be Colorado? Because their season isn't going to be defined against Colorado. If they win that game, great. They're going to find themselves in the top 25 with the way their schedule shakes out, because they start with 4 straight games at home. UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, Illinois. I expect them to win all 4 of those games. The Colorado one, let's say they drop it. It's possible. The Buffs are a much improved team, as is Nebraska, particularly at the quarterback position. They're going to play Colorado, and let's say they lose that one, and they're 3-1. Then they go at Purdue. Look, you can stumble in West Lafayette, Indiana. Better teams than 2024 Nebraska football have lost there before. I expect the Cornhuskers to be favored in that game. Then they host Rutgers, and then they go at Indiana. And look, anytime you have a young quarterback like Dylan Raiola, who's expected to be the starter, going on the road, you can ask questions, but it won't be his first road test. And Kurt Cignetti's coming over to, try and jumpstart the Indiana football program. I don't expect a lot from the Hoosiers in year one. In fact, I don't really expect much of anything there. So I don't think they're going to stumble in that spot. Purdue would be the more likely of those 2 games in which they would lose, and you go, did they really lose to that team? But then everything gets, shall we say, exciting or interesting for Nebraska. They go at Ohio State. They're not going to win that football game. Then they host UCLA. They should win that football game. I am much higher on Nebraska with Matt Rhule in year 2 than I am Deshaun Foster's team in year 1. I think UCLA is going to ride the struggle bus this season in the Big Ten. But the next week, they go at USC. And that's the most important game on their schedule, because what I have argued on this show before is that Nebraska, with Dylan Raiola at quarterback, if he's just mildly competent and reaches 40%, 50% of his ceiling as a true freshman, maybe not even that, if he throws for 200 yards a game, Nebraska has a much improved offense, and they probably win at least 8 games. If they're going to accomplish that, and I suspect they will, that game at USC is going to tell us a lot. I don't even know if they necessarily have to win that game. They just have to respond to whatever they do that week properly. Because the next week they come back home, they host Wisconsin. That's not going to be a team you can just roll through and walk over and get an easy win, even at home, before they go at Iowa. So the last 3 games of their year, that's pretty tough. You got a bunch of teams right at the top of Tier 2. Those are top of Tier 2, fringe bottom Tier 1 teams in the Big Ten, which is an 18-team conference now because, make it make sense. And so I put those schools into 3 tiers, 6 in Tier 1, 6 in Tier 2, 6 in Tier 3. USC is a team that I'm higher on than most. If they go win that game at USC, in the Coliseum, who knows where USC season is at? I suspect they'll be having a good year and will be over 500. How far? That might depend on how well D'Anton Lynn steps in to fix the defense that Alex Grinch kind of left for him, and he's worked to rebuild through the transfer portal this year. But if they win that game at USC, it's hard to see them losing both games against Wisconsin and Iowa, and suddenly you're pushing for a 10-2 campaign. It's on the table. The preseason win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 7.5. I love that over. I love that over because they can build so much confidence in the early going, and that Colorado game is big. I'm not trying to say that it's not a game we're going to pay attention to or it's a game that we should overlook. No. It's a game that isn't going to define their season. That USC game is. Because let's say they lose to Colorado, they win the rest of their games until Ohio State, they lose, they've got 2 losses, and then all of a sudden they've got 3 at USC with a loss. What I mean to say is they've got 3 with a loss at USC. To come back home against Wisconsin, you've lost 2 or 3 games. You could be in wounded animal mode. Now, maybe it fires up your locker room and a sense of focus and rage and determination sets in. But you got a true freshman at quarterback. He's going to be more experienced by then. He won't have a full season under his belt. That game at USC, if you walk into the Coliseum and beat Lincoln Riley, boy, that says a lot, not just about the team, but the program of Nebraska football. Because if Matt Rhule in his second season is beating Lincoln Riley in Los Angeles in his third season, that says a lot about what Matt Rhule could build. And I don't think Nebraska is a program that is going to suddenly recapture its once and former glory. But can it be a program better than what it's been? Yeah, of course. Of course it can. Most programs that are not title contenders or perennial 8 to 10 win teams, you can be better than you are. There can be a notion that circulates out there, particularly on the interwebs, that this program is always going to be this. This is what they've been. This is what they're going to be. I don't think that's true. I don't even think that's true about Vanderbilt. I make an unnecessary amount of jabs at Vanderbilt, but it's a reference everybody understands. Vanderbilt has not been a good football program. They've been horrible. They also had a couple of 9-win seasons. Why? They hired the right coach. Any program, particularly at the Power 4 level, but this applies to the Group of 5 as well, within the context of that conference, any program can be better than it has been if you just make the right hire. It's why there's so much money, even at programs that aren't historically great or that don't have big expectations, put so much money into these coaching searches or hire outside firms. They take so much time. They are willing to pay so much money because if you get it right, you can change everything. I think Matt Rhule is a more than capable football coach for Nebraska, and I don't think he's going to get them to a Big Ten title contender status this season. Next year, could they push for that? Dylan Raiola in year 2, if you keep him around and keep him out of the transfer portal, which I suspect they'll be able to since he'll start this year. If they go 8-4, which right now is kind of where I'm feeling with my record prediction on Nebraska, that's just going to be a really, really exciting time to be a Cornhusker fan. Because you're going to have a young quarterback, an ascending program, and a head coach who's proven he can win at various locations. Let me know what Temple football has done in a major way since Matt Rhule left. You just got to have the right coach. And Matt Rhule, to me, seems like the right coach. But that game at USC is going to define their season because that final stretch is brutally tough. But you can change the mood in that locker room, which everydayers may notice is a consistent theme I talk about when defining the most important game of a team's season. What does it do for the momentum that you have in the year? Losing 2 of 3, coming back home for your regular season finale for senior day, that's a lot different than winning on the road at USC after beating UCLA, beating both of the newcomers and showing the new kids on the block, hey, rookies, you got some learning to do. There's an adjustment here. So I highlight that game at USC, November 16th, as the most important game on Nebraska's schedule. If you want me to do your team or any other team, just let me know. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.